Hi, my name's John Beaudry. I'm the author of Garden Sanctuary, Designing for Comfort, Wholeness, and Connection. This is the last in a series of videos based on my book. In the last video, we talked about creating your base plan and the 5 layers that will support you in discovering your concepts. So those layers are the bubble diagram, the site analysis, the grid drawing, lines of force, and the bubble diagram. Those are going to help you in sifting your design out of all of that information. So one of the things, and pattern drawings was another one. So with the pattern drawings, you're creating blocks of color and an empty space. So there's positive and negative spaces that arise from these patterns. The positive spaces can be planting masses that will separate different areas of the garden to give it more three-dimensionality and depth and more discovery. So when you walk out your back door and you see the whole yard, it may seem like a decent-sized yard, but when you break it up into many different spaces and you can't see everything at once, it gives the illusion of the yard feeling much larger than it is. So the concept drawing is really about the organization of space. It's about how you get from A to B and what goes where. And it's tempting as it may be to start thinking about plants at this point, it's still better to wait and get the design laid out. And we're going to talk about how you lay out plants later in this video. So to create your first concept, and I recommend that you create at least 3, and knowing that you're going to create multiple drawings, I would, be free about this. Don't feel so like you have to get it right. Just try something, make some marks on the paper, and do the first concepts also on the tracing paper. So you lay it over the other layers. So you're going to tape down your base plan, and then you can tape in the other layers as necessary to help you figure out where the patio areas are going to be, where the living areas are going to be, where you're going to have planting masses, where you're going to have a shady seating area, where you might have a vegetable garden. All those kind of things you want to start thinking about. You can use your grid to help you organize the space. It helps to stay within the lines of the grid or the lines of force so that the garden areas relate to the house and have a relationship to the space of the house, and so the gardens relate inside and out, basically. The patterns will help you create the different areas. So if you're going to use the patterns, if you're going to do a number of squares to make patterns, you would fill in the squares, and then you have positive and negative spaces. The positive spaces is where you filled in the squares. The negative is the open spaces. So you use those different things to label them as a seating area, or as a planting mass, or as these different areas I just mentioned. You want to try to create spaces that are appropriately sized. So, how big does a patio need to be? Well, that depends on you, on how are you going to use it. How many people do you like to entertain for? How many people are in your core family, and do you need your patio to accommodate for a dining room table for just your family? And how large would it need to be if you're going to have a party? How many guests would you normally have? Some people like to entertain a lot and want a lot of outdoor spaces and need a lot of space to accommodate all those people. Some people don't entertain that much and really just want it for their family and close friends. So if you want to have just a small table of 4 for your dining room table, you want to make sure that you can have enough room to fit your table there, have a chair pulled out, and still have room for somebody to walk around behind it, because people need to flow through the areas as well. So I recommend taking little cutouts that are to scale of the furniture that you want to use in your plan, and place those on the plan so that you know that you have enough space to accommodate the uses that you plan for those areas. So for example, with walkways, I'm standing on a sidewalk outside. Most sidewalks are 4 feet. On a 4-foot walkway, you can easily accommodate 2 people walking. In larger public areas, you'll see sidewalks that are 6, 8, 10 feet, and they're all built based on the amount of people that the designers felt will be using those spaces. So if you're doing a front walk to your house, you want that to be nice and wide, maybe at least 4, maybe 6 feet wide. And if there's a path that leads off to around the house, that can be smaller, probably 3 feet. 2 foot is a little bit narrow for, you can really only walk one person on it, single file, and you really don't have any room. If there's anything beside it, like bushes or anything coming up, your elbows can knock on a 2 foot wide path. So you want to have paths should be geared to the use. Everything is really a form follows function kind of situation in garden design. So plant beds and borders. You want to have, if you're going to have a planting area to break up a couple of different areas, you need to have room for a larger shrub that's going to be kind of a background and the screening plant, but you also want to be able to have a couple of different plants in front of it. So every plant is going to take up a minimum of probably 2 feet. So if you want to have it 3 feet deep, you need a 2 foot perennial, maybe another 2 foot perennial, and then a 3 or 4 foot shrub. So that's 2, 4, 8, or 10 feet you would need just for a planting mass to separate a couple of different areas. So little strips of planting beds don't work so well because all you can do is line plants in little rows around things, and it's very common for designers to just follow the outlines of different shapes. And what we want to do is break up the linearity of the garden. You don't want to accentuate the lines of a patio. So framing it with a little box of plants is maybe not the best thing to do. Whereas putting a larger planting mass where you can get some depth and variation, things that'll bloom at different times of the year. That's kind of that's the goal here. I talked about patios, being able to back away from them, and so then once you've drawn up your concept, you want to start and do another concept. You don't have to redo all those layers that we did. That's all the information that's feeding your concept. So you can do, like I said, you can do a rectilinear plan where everything is oriented exactly as the rooms in your house out in the garden. You can turn that plan at an angle, a 45-degree angle or whatever you choose, and then work with spaces within that grid. The rooms are still going to relate to the sizes of the house because you're still working with those proportions, but it's at a skewed angle. That can be very interesting for contemporary design. And then the third option you might try for a third concept could be curvilinear, where you use circles to come up with the different areas. And then I have examples of all that in the book. And so once you've got your concepts done, then you get to pick which concept you like. And it may be that you like part of one and part of another, and you can actually bring them together. Again, because you're doing these on tracing paper, you can lay the two final winning concepts together, and then draw it out and merge the two. Take the best of both. So once you've chosen the concept that you want to work with, it's time to start thinking about plants. You've been very patient in going through all these steps. It takes a long time to get to the point of actually choosing plants. You can start thinking about what plants you want ahead of time and get a list, but before you start saying where any plants go, it's really a good idea to think about, what does the space require? What is the plant going to do for you? What work is it going to perform? What I mean by that, is it going to provide just color and fragrance? Is it going to provide screening? Is it going to have to stay below a window? Are you going to want it to screen a window? Are you wanting it to block a view to screen? All of these things are important considerations, and what I suggest is going through the whole design and drawing in plants without even thinking what they are. Just start drawing in circles for representing the plants. And I have in the book, I talk about plant symbols and what symbols to use and how to lay them out on the plan. But basically, you want to start thinking about the three-dimensionality of the plant. How big is it going to grow? And when picking plants, you want to start with, I like to start with the biggest plants first, trees. Trees are like the bones of the garden. They're there through summer and winter. If the leaves fall in winter, the structure of it is still there. It's the frame, the framework of the garden. The shrubs are like the flesh that till out the bones and give it strength and depth. And then Next come perennial plants, or they're called herbaceous perennials, plants that typically die down to the ground in the winter and then regrow the following year. Those are often the source of most of the color in the garden, and yet there are many plants that can provide many shrubs that can also provide great color with their leaves and flowers as well. So when choosing plants, you really want to read the label, and if it doesn't have a label, find out what the plant is and look it up in a book. There's all kinds of books that will tell you how big things grow, all kinds of internet pages that will as well. You want to think about, for example, if you're planting a plant that you want to stay under the windowsill and the windowsill is 3 feet off the ground, you want to choose a plant that's not going to grow more than 3 feet tall. That way you're not locked into coming in and pruning that plant all the time to keep it below the window. It'll never grow above the window. You can just let it grow and express its full form. That's a beautiful thing. Very often people skip the whole design process, go out to Home Depot or wherever they go to buy plants, buy a few plants that look nice, come back, honey, where should we plant these? We'll plant these over here. Well, where should we plant those? Let's plant those over there. And that happens weekend after weekend throughout a summer or throughout time, and before you know it, you've got a garden full of these and those, and it's not really thought about what goes where. So take the time to think about, to lay out your whole design, get that pinned down, and then start working with the planting plan, and decide first what the site calls for, and then choose the plant to fit the site. So when you're looking at plants, we're going to talk a little bit about plant characteristics. So size, I've been talking about size. That's the most obvious thing. There's another term called habit, the habit of a plant. The habit of a plant is its shape. So if we just look behind me here, this tree is very upright and broad spreading. And that's actually a description of a plant's form, broad spreading. If we look at, if we can just pan the camera over here, there's some Italian cypress over there. Those are very upright and vertical. There's actually a term for that called fastigiate. There are plants that are, like if we look at these birds of paradise, they really have, if you selected one out, it's a bit of a vase-shaped plant. So there's many different forms, but you want to pick the form, again, that's going to be suited to what you need. Plants that are very upright and vertical work great for hedges. You just need to worry about how tall they get, because Italian cypress can reach 70 feet, but only be 4 or 5 feet wide at the base. Texture is another thing. As you're choosing plants, you want to choose plants that have different textures. So if you have a hedge behind and you want to plant another plant in front, the hedge might be fine textured, and then you might want to use a coarser textured plant in front of it to create contrast. These are the language of. I'm starting to use the language of design that we learned earlier. Then color. Okay, so color is probably one of the most dramatic characteristics that plants have. Flowers are the most obvious place we get color, but many plants have beautiful foliage colors as well. And in the fall, many plants lose their leaves and turn a whole myriad of colors. It's wonderful to be able to know what those colors are going to be. Again, by reading the label and reading about the plant, you can orchestrate a beautiful fall tapestry in your garden by having, for example, a red bud tree that will turn yellow with leaves, and maybe a Japanese maple that's going to get bright orange leaves, and then maybe something else behind it, like a sugar maple, is going to have a mix of reds and oranges and even purples. So you can work with all the different colors of plants and contrast them. If you're working with perennials, most of them only bloom for a month or so. So you want to have something that's going to bloom in the spring, something that's going to bloom midsummer, and something that's going to bloom late summer. And then in temperate climates, you want to have plants that have winter interest. People in California don't understand that term, but we have green most of the year round, so that's great. But the majority of the country does not have that, and we really need to think about, what is the winter landscape going to look like? What are the seed heads going to be? And how is that all going to play out throughout the whole season. We're creating a orchestra that's going to happen over time. It's like a fireworks display. You need to know what the firework is going to do and then have it go off at the right time so that you get the whole effect. It's the same thing with the garden. Okay, color. All right, now then we talk about different types of plants. Like I said, it's nice to start with trees. If you imagine how nature works, maybe there's a fence row along a field, and a bird brings along a hickory nut, and the hickory nut grows into a tree and starts to create a little bit of a shade, which makes a nice habitat for another plant to come in, and there's another shrub that forms underneath it, and then next to that maybe another plant will come in and take in, and you begin to develop a cluster of plants, and it grows and spreads over time as more plants get added to it. That happens naturally in nature, but you can create the same kind of effect. And so in thinking about the garden, like I said, the trees are the bones of the landscape, the structural elements. And oftentimes you might want to create like a planting mass where you have a tree at the back of it with some shrubs underneath and then some perennials in front. And then there's even ephemerals that come in, like spring bulbs, tulips, daffodils, that are only going to come for a period of a couple of weeks and then be gone. So those are all of these different elements play into the symphony of colors and things that you have. And along with perennials are also grasses. Grasses are a tremendous complement to the garden, and one of their best assets is their seed heads. And oftentimes the light comes through at the right angle, and if you have the conditions where the sun is going to get low on the horizon and come through the garden sideways and can backlight the seed heads of grass, it's a tremendous effect. And those seed heads will often last through the whole winter, provide a food source for birds through the winter, and begin to create that harmony that you so want for your own garden. It's going to give you that feeling of wholeness, of being connected and feeling safe. So I'm hoping that you've had an experience by now of a little bit of transformation. Once you get in and go through this process yourself, you're going to really discover that plants have so much more to offer than we ever imagined. And if you can plant a vegetable garden, you'll see the unbelievable bounty that one seed can provide. I mean, more tomatoes than you know what to do with, and you're giving them away to friends. And if other people are growing gardens, you can be sharing produce. And my vision is that we all have food available locally, and that we all are able to live in harmony with nature. And planting your own garden is an inspiration to the people around you. We often find that when we come in to do a garden, suddenly the neighbors around start getting inspired and doing it. They start talking to each other because they're curious about what one did and what the other did. It's a great way to get out of your house and get connected to people. And we're outside, we can wear face masks, and we can still be around each other and talk about each other's gardens, especially outside. So I highly encourage you to do that. I thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you'll buy my book. Have a great day.